I found that you actually enlisted in the Army at age 17. And I thought that was pretty cool because you're not supposed to be able to join the Army at 17. So what happened there?
No, thanks for having me. Yeah, it's what I always wanted to do since I was a little kid, right? So actually, I called the recruiter when I was 16, and the recruiter's like, "What are you running away from? Drugs? You in trouble with the law?" And I was like, "Well, not that the law knows about. No, I'm not. I just want to join the Army." And they're like, "You got to be 17 with your parents' signature." So I called back a week before my 17th birthday. I was like, "Hey, I want to join the Army. Let's go." And actually, I had to convince my parents because they didn't want me to join. So I said,
Oh,
"Hey,
really?
I'm going to turn 18 and join anyways. This just speeds it up a few months." So yeah, I shipped off, last summer after graduating high school because I graduated when I was 17. And then I was in the Army 4 months, I guess, 3 or 4 months. And that's when I turned 18.
Okay. And then what year was that?
That was 1998. These gray hairs are earned, not dyed in.
Well, looks good, man. It's all good. That's your thing. It's your thing, you know?
It is.
It's good. It's good to have a thing. I don't think I have a thing. Maybe one of these days I'll get a thing. I don't know. I don't know what it would be. These big floppy ears, maybe. I don't know. So cool. So you joined the Army at 17, and then what was your MOS to begin with, and then what was your transition into SF?
Yeah, I had two dreams as a little kid, right? First one was I wanted to be a Green Beret. And a lot of it is the guy on my shirt. If people can see it, it's Roy Benavidez, and the shirt's about to come out. Like, if you can read up about Roy Benavidez, I mean, you want to talk
Yes.
about a hero, a Green Beret from the Vietnam era, just incredible. And that's what I wanted to be. I wanted to be like him. But I'm colorblind, specifically red-green colorblind. And when I was joining, they said, "Hey, you can't go in the tree. You can't do all this stuff." And I was like, "Okay, what can I do?" And they were like,
Yeah.
"You can do this admin work, or you can do this chaplain's assistant." And I said, "No, I'm the chaplain's assistant," which looks best on a resume. For whatever reason, all the admin jobs end up getting combined. So it was all the same thing, essentially. So I joined as admin, paper pusher, pack clerk, extraordinaire.
So okay, so you want to be a Green Beret, then you go into an admin role. What's the move there from paper pusher to people puncher?
I always wanted to do more, and I was gnawing at, and I wanted to. And my other goals, I had two goals in life, was to be a drill sergeant. So fortunately, I was able to get drill sergeant orders. I went and was forced to do the drill sergeant of the year competition, and I'm just too stubborn to lose, so I won. And then that's a thing in the Army where you go for a year and you do different activities at the higher levels with leadership. And then it was like, I still got this other dream, and I don't want to be 60 years old, fortunate enough to be alive, sitting on a porch going, what would have happened? What could have happened? What should have happened? I'm going for it. So I actually was an E7 when I went to selection. I'd been in, I think, just past 10 years. So it was, it was different, but it was, hey, I'm following my dream, and I'm either going to die or I'll get selected. That was my philosophy going into Special Forces selection.
That's great, and I love that. I'm either gonna die or I'll get selected.
That's it.
That's kind of burning the boats type deal. Um, that's neat. I want to talk more about that, but I actually want to dive into drill sergeant a little bit because I did see that you were a drill sergeant when I was doing research on you, and I was just a regular Army dude. I only stayed in for 4, got out, and then I joined the reserves later on. But I always thought that must be the funnest gig ever, just being a drill sergeant. Like, what are your thoughts on that?
One of those, I loved it, and you either love
Yeah.
it or you hate it because it's
Okay.
a crazy amount of hours. It's
Sure. Yeah.
I guess what normal people would consider stressful, but I loved it because, like, wait, I get to, train and mold future soldiers, America's sons and daughters. That's a huge responsibility, and I love doing it. So I loved it. Absolutely loved it.
Hey, and have you noticed any changes from when you were a drill sergeant to how it is now? And what are those changes?
Yeah, I don't even know what it's like now, Well, no, actually, I've seen on social media, like, they have their cell phones, and I'm like, well, they got their cell phone and they're getting on the internet and social media. Yeah, it's different, right? But we always evolve, right? Just like when we went through is different than
Sure.
people went through in the 70s. And I think in general,
Hmm.
it evolves for the better. Soldiers,
Yeah.
when I was a drill sergeant, were much better trained in skills coming out of basic training than when I, 10, 12, 10, or how many ever years before it went through. So it evolves.
Yeah. I see a lot of drill sergeants on they're on TikTok live now with all their people and they're messing with them, and I think it's great. I actually think it's great advertising for recruiting because I think a lot of young people, especially, they see that and they're like, man, I kind of want to be a part of that. They'll like, and of course, drill sergeants, they come across as mean and stuff like that if you don't know what they're doing, but at the end of the day, they're the best people. I mean, they really, like you said, they care about training our kids and turning them into soldiers and making sure that they put their best foot forward so that when they go into a real situation they have the training they need to be effective as a soldier or whatever. So
Yeah,
I've always had a lot of respect for drill sergeants.
yeah, I think so. And it looks different, right? Well, most people think of caring, maybe I'm biased, but it's like, oh, give a hug. And are you okay, buddy? There
Yeah,
may be a little bit of that as a drill sergeant, but for a lot of it, you're building them up and
sure.
it's harsh and tough love, but it's for the betterment, right? And that's what I always was very tough, but I mean fair, and I loved it. And I really wanted to see them succeed. And there's no feeling like that seeing someone else succeed. And something else you said on that topic of, the drill sergeants, certain people post on social media, the Army's adapting, right? The Army has
Yeah.
to adapt because how do we reach young people to join the military? They're on social media. You better get on or they're not going to join.
Yeah. During your time as a drill sergeant, do you have any soldiers that you remember that really stand out that you helped along the way, or that your team of drill sergeants helped along the way?
Yeah, I do. I remember one who came through to get college money, went on
Hmm.
to become a doctor, and had reached back out to the drill sergeants. Awesome. Another one of my soldiers went on to be a Green Beret, right? And I had support MOSs like myself. He went on. So, yeah, there's certain ones stick out. And let's be real. There's a couple knuckleheads that you're
Of
like, oh,
course,
I'm
there's a
never going to
lot of
forget that
knuckleheads.
person. I'm not going to forget them.
There's a lot of knuckleheads. I read a story recently about a drill sergeant who would just every day he would wake up, pick a name, right, and then like that day would be that person's day, right, and they would just eat it all day, and they'd have the drill sergeant, and the story wraps up with the soldier comes to him at the end and says, "Hey, you really gave me a lot of struggle that day," and his reply was, "That was your day," and everybody knew it, right? Everybody knew that they had their own day. Anyways, great story. Okay, so shifting from uh, drill sergeant, you're an older person in selection at that point, right? As a E7 going through, but you also have a little bit of time in rank, so that probably maybe helps a little bit. But what was that experience like moving from regular enlisted to going through selection and kind of living your dream of being a Green Beret? And then maybe beyond that, like what was it specifically about being Green Beret that stuck with you for so long? Because you know, I could see a lot of people kind of give up on that dream after a while, especially being in the service for so long.
For me, it was different, right? Being a drill
Yeah.
sergeant. And then I was the drill sergeant of the year. So, like, literally, I'm sitting down to have lunch and maybe a beer with like a 3-star general and their senior
Right.
list of ours. So, I
Yeah.
went from that environment to selection, but it's all right here, right? It was a mindset. I didn't think I was anybody. I was just another number, and they're going to have to take me out here in a body bag. I'm going, right? And that is my mentality I had going into selection, then on to the qualification course, then on through the rest of my career. So it was different, right? It's a very different, and especially as you know, being a drill sergeant is very follow the rules, rigid process. Flip over to being a Green Beret, unconventional warfare. You know the rules, so you can
Yeah.
push the boundaries, if you will. So it is two very different worlds. But for me, I wanted to be a Green Beret because I saw somewhere in, I think it was a National Geographic magazine, about working by, with, and through an indigenous force. And that is, I love that, right? Yeah, a lot of people
Hmm.
think Green Berets, they're like, oh, they Rambo. And if I took my shirt off
Yeah.
right now, we could prove that myth wrong, at least for me. But I love yes, you shoot guns and you jump out of planes, you do all that, blow stuff up, but building relationships, earning trust, training someone to defend themselves, and there's 100 of them and one of you or 5 of us and 50 of them, there's nothing like it.
Great. So, and that's such a transferable skill in life. Um, what did you learn maybe through training or through your experience that really stuck with you when in terms of just connecting with people and kind of building those relationships?
Humans are humans. And I know that's so simple, but I don't care if it's, a 20-year-old here in the States shipping off to basic training, or it's a farmer or a tribal elder in a faraway land or a militia member. All of us really just want to belong to something, right? And we want to get better in life. And for the most part, if you're there and people see that you care, then you'll start earning their trust. And it's the same to me. I mean, yes, there's differences in languages and cultures, but at the end of the day, it's very similar. And for me, being a drill sergeant helped being a Green Beret, because a lot of what Green Berets do is train indigenous forces. And I've trained American sons and daughters and then flipped it over. So
you mentioned showing people that you care. Like, what are some ways you could show people that you care?
Just little simple things, right? It's for a lot of people that can't understand, oh my God, in a combat zone or whatnot, but like, hey, Nick, how you doing today? Hey, how's the kids' baseball game? Simple things like, hey, how'd your daughter's dance recital go? Little things like that make a human connection, right? Not just transactional, but making a human connection, and you get to know them, right? And that, and not acting like you're somebody important. I think, not like, oh, look at me, I'm big barrel-chested freedom fighting American. No, I'm just Herb. I want to get to know you. I'm here to help and work through them and get to know them.
And then how did you apply those in your experience with deployments and stuff like that? Like, what stories stick out to you?
Just sitting around, simple things like maybe the best weapon is a cigarette. And I don't smoke, but people tend to talk when you have a cigarette in your mouth, and you're just, like soldiers, right? Like we all would get around and throw rocks or something. Like bored people do talk. So just little things like that of like eating chow with them, eating their dinner, eating their food, asking about their culture. Because a lot of us go in there as Americans and we don't care. Ask about their culture. And this still carries to today. If I go to a company or go anywhere, like, ask questions about their culture. Just those little things, they'll show you start to care. And as you get to know them better, you can ask more personal questions like, yep, how's the kids? How are they doing? In a war zone, like, whoa, how are they surviving this? Like, this is kind of complicated. But really just asking human questions, basic human stuff that you would ask someone, back home. Like, hey, Mr. Smith, how are you doing? How's life been going? Kind of same stuff.
You mentioned to ask about their culture. Can you maybe give me an example of how you might do that? Because, and I think it's great, and it sounds like common sense, probably to some people, but to a lot of people, this is not common sense, because people are very focused on themselves. They're very. I realized this, I think in high school. That's about the time you start worrying about how you look and all these things. But I realized very early on that, first of all, I'm very ugly, so I don't have to worry about these things. No, I'm just no. I realized very early on that, people spend a lot of time in their own heads, and they don't really care about what's in your head so much. But what are some ways that you would maybe ask those questions about culture, whether that's a business or, a foreign person that you're trying to influence?
I think that's a good question, because if you're like, hey, tell me about the culture, it's like, okay,
exactly.
Weirdo, get out of here. But what do you guys do around here? How do you normally operate? How do you, what's your day-to-day like? And then maybe in a manner where you're inquisitive, not, interrogating, but like, hey, why do you do it like that? Like, oh, I didn't know you guys ate that food. Like, how do you prepare that? Right? Just little things are like, oh, how'd you do that? I don't know how to do that. Could you teach me? Could I learn more? And I mean, in a very personal level, even in the civilian world, I tend to stay away from all times religion, politics, things like that. But when I've come across some people at religions where they're doing something different, right? And you can see they're wearing
Sure.
something. I'm like, well,
Yeah.
hey, I'm not trying to pry, but could you help me understand? Because I think this is pretty interesting. People are like, you mean to tell me you want to? I had a coworker in the civilian world was doing this pilgrimage in India, and I just
Yeah.
asked about it, and he was so excited to share about it. And quite frankly, I was so excited to learn about it because I'm just generally curious about other people.
That's a good way to put it. Be genuinely curious about other people. Like, don't just float through life. Like, have a genuine curiosity for other people. And man, it's so easy to say, but so hard to do, isn't it?
It is, and then it makes it easy because then once you start talking, you're like, oh wait, I know more. Oh, what was it like growing up in the mountains? Or
Yeah.
same for me, I grew up in rural area, right? You grew up in the city. Wait, you've never drove a car? What do you mean you never drove a car? How's that work? How do you get around? Well, I ride the subway, or I walk, or
Yeah. Yeah.
I take a bus. It's little simple things like that that just, if you're genuinely curious, you can make a connection. Instead of just checking the box, hey, how are you doing today, Nick? Good. Okay, let's get to business. No, let's talk a little bit and get to know each other because people do business with people.
Yeah. Um, that's very true. People do business with people.
It's simple stuff. Like,
Yeah. Well, I think, you say it like it's simple, but man, it's really hard to apply these things and just remember them every day. Like, hey, I do need to focus on people. I need to not be so worried about everything all the problems that I have, but maybe I could talk to my coworker about, hey, what are you working on today, man? Like, what do you got going on? It's a great reminder.
it is. And if I could briefly
Yeah.
go back to special forces, how it translates, right? Like, now do that in life here when you have social media, you got kids, you got work going on, the bosses are telling you to get work done, and everything going on in society around us. Now take that overseas into a combat zone when people are shooting at you.
Mm-hmm.
And you're like, let's slow it down. Hey, let's get to know you a little better. Oh, that wouldn't be the way I would do it, but let's do it anyways. Putting your life at risk, but to be gaining that trust and to be gaining, I don't want to call it a friendship, but really it's a trust. And it's a commitment. Either you kind of do it or you don't. And people who do it, I believe, are successful, and people that don't, I think oftentimes they struggle.
Well, since you mentioned, going overseas, the combat and stuff like that, that question's coming about. Just maybe you could tell. You know what? You've been on a bunch of podcasts. We don't need to go over all the combat scenarios. Just if you're interested, just Google Herb Thompson and look at some of that stuff. What I'm more interested is how are you applying your experience, whether that's in combat scenarios or your military experience, how are you applying that today into what you're doing now? And we could maybe talk about, all the things that you got going on.
No, I appreciate that. Yeah, it's fear. How do you handle fear? Because only psychopaths are not scared, especially in combat, right? So it's overcome, or jumping out of an airplane. Let's even back it up to where some people may be more relatable. Most people are like, oh, I'm scared of that. And it's like, you have to overcome that fear. If you can overcome a fear, jumping out of a plane, running to the shooting and sounds of gun versus running away, searching for the enemy, going into a hostile area, you can come back here and pick up a phone. They go, hey, would you like to have a chat? Just get to know you. Maybe down the road it'll lead to business, but so many people are afraid. I've seen, and I've reached out to people that, quite frankly, I should have no business talking to under normal standards, but I don't care if they're an executive. I don't care, if they're some celebrity, quote unquote. If I feel there's a need, I'm genuinely interested. I'm going to reach out. But that overcoming that little fear, so many people don't do it. But in my mind, if I can overcome the fear of surviving an ambush, jumping out of an airplane, I can type a little message and go, hey, Nick, want to have a chat?
Yeah, well, hopefully I'm not that intimidating. Anybody can reach me. Just shoot me a thing. It's all good. Well, that's a great point, though, is the way I always put this, and it's a similar philosophy is I do mentor like younger business owners and people coming up through in business, and I always tell them that you are entitled to be successful. And it's just for some reason that seems to zing with people because that word entitled means like, oh yeah, hold on, I have every right to be successful, to go talk to the people I need to talk to. There's no reason to be afraid of that. So much of that, what you're talking about, celebrity and things like that, a lot of that stuff is manufactured, right? let's be
Oh
real. It's
yeah.
especially like movies. Like, can you pick a group of people that are less interesting than actors? I mean, I don't think you can.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
But
Tough.
not to say that they're not some awesome actors. Of course there are. Here I go again. Man, these actors are gonna hate me, but that's okay. I don't care. What I care about are veterans. So that's what I care about. I care about veterans. Um, you wrote a book on transitioning from service. Um, now that you've been out for a while, what would you change about that book? About what you wrote in there?
It's been about 6 years. I don't know if I would change. I mean, full disclosure, I don't know if I remember what's in the book. And people ask me all the time. I've literally had people like, hey, on page 82, you said this. And
I
I
love
go,
that.
give me a second. Page 82, I said, because it was,
Yeah.
6 years ago, 5 years ago, whatever it was. Yeah, I think obviously I have a little bit different perspective now and why some things happen in the transition. But for the most part, I wasn't, because I kept it pretty basic of this is your
Mm-hmm.
starting point. Here's how you can start looking at this and
Sure.
discovery and searching for jobs and leveraging LinkedIn and figuring out who you are, using your previous skills. So I wouldn't change much because at least what I remember of the book, it's because each individual's journey, like yours, is different than mine, right? There's
Sure.
some commonalities, and that's where we go, okay, let's start here. But then once you get going, now almost 6 years for me, retired out of the Army, I'm in a way different position, and I've done a lot over the last 6 years. So I will say probably the biggest thing, and I knew this when I wrote the book, but my biggest part, we talked about earlier on the podcast, belief. I had to believe I was going to be okay. And I knew I could do the Army stuff, shoot, move,
Mm-hmm.
communicate. I could do that. That I've been trained. Matter of fact,
Yeah.
we spent tons of hours, tons of dollars. The country did training me to do that. I could do it, and I knew I was good at it. I had that whole concern of, can I be good out here without the uniform, without
Sure.
the organization of the military? And it was that belief. And for me, once I had that belief, tons of downs after that. Like, hey, not getting jobs, looking in the bottom of a liquor bottle, you name it. I've been there. But
Mm-hmm.
the belief that I was going to be okay was really the critical moment for me.
Well, there's a lot there. I would like to ask you about, alcohol and I've had this thought recently. And look, I just like a lot of American males, right? I grew up since high school drinking alcohol, and you go in the military, it's a thing there. And luckily, I never felt like I was addicted to alcohol at any point. But now that I'm older and I look back, I'm like, man, I don't even know how I made it alive to this age. I don't know. And I've had this thought more recently of like, why did we make the alcohol such a cultural norm? It is the worst drug in the world. I mean, it's the cause of most accidents. It's, teenage deaths. I mean, you name it. It is the absolute worst thing. And I've just had this thought of like, man, why? I think as adults, we should really just be saying, nah, like we're done. We're done. Like this should have never been a cultural norm in the United States. And it pains my heart every time I see somebody, getting a fatal car crash or something like that from alcohol. And I know everyone's gonna say, yeah, but cars are gonna drive themselves. Okay, but bad things still happen with alcohol. Nothing good happens after 12 a.m. What are your
I,
thoughts on that?
I believe alcohol is a complicated topic, right? And it
Yeah,
is. In full disclosure, I still have a drink, right? Like last night on my
sure.
dinner, I had a drink. So I'm not preaching to anyone, hey, you don't drink. Well, what I do know, when I was drinking half a bottle of liquor a day, and I'm not talking a little bottle. It
Yeah.
didn't help, right? It numbed my pain, and that's what it was. When I was getting an MBA at Cornell, I was working in corporate America. When I got done with work, never during work, but when I got done, I would drink until I could fall asleep. That's the only way I was
Wow.
falling asleep. I would
Wow.
wake up in the morning feeling aching, like my body always hurts. I got so much stuff
Sure.
wrong with me,
Yeah.
but the alcohol is not helping the inflammation, right? It's making it worse. So it just became a cycle. Man, I feel so bad. Let me do this. And but it is a lot like you drank in high school. That was we grew up in a rural area. Hey, go out and have a field party, and but even in like events, right?
Sure.
I think overcome that stigma is it's okay not to drink, and if you want to just have one, whatever. If you don't want to, but like
Yeah.
look at how many functions, at least for me, what I've been to, not just military wise, but you go to a military ball, a cookout.
Sure.
Hey, you want a beer? And someone's going like this to you,
Yeah.
right? And you have to have that pushback on it or in moderation, which I think it comes down to the military in general doesn't do a good job of mental health and physical health care. Or let me back up.
Yeah. No,
I
I
think our
get it.
country does it, not just the military. Our
Yeah. Yeah.
country does it.
Sure.
And we go, okay, if this is alcohol, that's okay. But like these other treatments that maybe not as bad for you,
Mhm.
you can't do them. Just in the like army, you'll know this, pop Motrin and drink alcohol. Now they don't tell you to
Yeah.
drink alcohol, but everyone self-medicates, right? And
Yeah.
that's what I was doing. So it's complicated, right? Because you talk to some people from some other countries. I have some buddies who I serve with who grew up,
Mhm.
parents being stationed overseas, and they're like, "Yeah, dude, we just went to the vending machine and got alcohol. I was like 13. Who cared?" But like,
Yeah.
there wasn't the stigma around it. But what I found out, if you tell me not to do something,
Yeah. Yep.
I'm probably gonna go do it. Society's like, "Don't do this as a kid. Don't do it as a kid." So of course, like, okay, gonna do this, and it just kind of becomes a cultural thing that I don't know if you put the genie back in the bottle.
Yeah. I don't know what the perfect answer is, but I think especially amongst adults, there needs to be a better way to have that social lubricant, right? This is what they call alcohol, the social lubricant. There needs to be a better way for adults to just kind of hang out with one another and talk and connect like you're talking about. And
And
there should be a healthy way to do this, right? It doesn't need to be
it,
alcohol, but there should be something that you're sharing together, whether that's, a drink or a game or something that you're doing together that gives you that combined spirit.
yeah, there's multiple ways. And I think things where I've stood up and said something is when people made others uncomfortable for not drinking.
Yeah.
Like one of my
Yeah.
good
Forget that,
buddies I
man.
serve with on my team, he's Mormon. He's like, I don't drink alcohol. I knew that, right? So if
Hmm.
someone tried to pressure him, like you're going to be fighting me,
Hmm.
right? Because like you just don't do that. And same, Corey, my soon to be wife, longtime fiance, she doesn't drink, right? And we've been to so many adult
That's great.
events,
That's great. Good for
and
her.
people are like, "Oh, you're not drinking? You're not? Why aren't you
Look,
drinking?" And it
yeah.
causes like, is it a religious thing? Is it all these questions other than it's okay not to drink? Like
Yeah.
you can have fun without drinking. You can live life without drinking. You don't need to get smashed drunk at this party. Well, and when I
Hmm.
say party, I'm using that very loosely. Maybe it's a bank, but I've seen
Sure.
it with
Sure.
work events. And I'm like, of all places not to get smashed is probably in front of your bosses and coworkers. Like, let's think this through.
Yeah. Well, very good, man. I mean, it's just I've had that thought more recently, and I've always just kind of I've hated that social pressure around alcohol. It's just always kind of irked me a little bit, you know. But I
Hey,
think,
can I add on that
yeah,
real
yeah.
quick,
Go
Nick?
ahead. Yeah, yeah.
I've been looking into like other treatments, right? Because not just for myself, because my body's
Hmm.
breaking down has been pretty busted up, but like other people that served. And there's all these different treatments out there that have the stigma, right? Whether it's
Hmm.
through, like not prescription drugs, not going with opioids and stuff, but like actual drugs that we probably think of as bad, right? Old
Hmm.
school would be bad. There's ways to do that in controlled environments. I've been looking into other treatments. So I do believe it's probably can get better if we
Yeah.
embrace some other ways. And if that's getting together and we play a game or we we do something that we're bonding over instead of a drink, or, and same for treatments, right? I think it can get better. I just wanted to put that out there.
Well, I think you're onto something, which I just think as humans, we just don't know anything about health. I just think we're so ignorant as to what health is. Maybe some very basic stuff. Obviously, don't eat sugar, exercise, very basic stuff. But beyond that, man, I really think people are clueless. And for sure, it depends on who you are, right? Like, there's no treatment is good for everybody, or no plan is good for every person. It's amazing. I get my wife sends me this thing the other day. It's like, supplements are causing liver damage. It's like, okay, well, what should you not take supplements? I mean, what's wrong with
Yeah,
supplements?
what's
You know?
what doesn't? I mean, for me, hey, full disclosure, like I got in a pretty bad way after serving, and getting out, and about 18 months ago or so, my body shut down. Like I was literally, my body was eating itself, and it was bad. And Corey made me go to the docs. Gave me the ultimatum. Like she had been telling me, but gave me the ultimatum. I went in the docs, and the docs like, oh my God, like my all my numbers were off the chart.
Mm-hmm.
I knew I wasn't supposed to eat sugar and stuff. I knew I wasn't supposed to do certain things, but like I didn't care, right?
Mm-hmm.
In that wake up call, and then when I went back to see the doctor next time, he was like, "Hey, you're doing good now, man. We were worried about you. We didn't think you'd make it because my numbers were so far off the chart.
Mm-hmm.
My body had started eating itself. So I'm a type 2 diabetic, and I have to watch what my caloric intake, fitness, and then you realize sugar is in everything. Like
Oh, and everything.
I
Yeah,
did not,
yeah, yeah.
like you said, didn't know until I paid attention. And that day when the doc said, "Hey, I'm telling you, you're going to die, and it's going to be quick if you don't do this," we immediately drove to the grocery store. Let me find stuff, and I'm first time in my life I'm ever reading labels, and I'm like, 10 grams of sugar. Wait, 23
Everything.
grams of sugar, 40 grams of sugar, and I was like, where's the non-sugar stuff that is not Rice Krispie cakes, that tastes like styrofoam?
Yeah,
But it's been an adventure.
yeah. You're so right, man. Everything. And I like you. I don't have a perfect diet. And I go through times where I'm really focused on it, and then not. And for me, it's always just been about being consistent. If I can find a consistent thread, I'm golden and feeling really good. But man, sugar, it's in everything. I mean, even the stuff you wouldn't think that it's in there. Like, it's in everything.
I was
And
blown away.
it's just wild. The more you focus on it, the more you see it. It's like it's like that never ending hallway, man. The more you look down at it, the more you see.
And,
Um,
and when I was in, it didn't matter as much, right? Because I ate a lot more clean, to be fair, and
sure.
I was working out like a madman. My
Yeah.
conundrum became,
Yeah.
I'm in pain just standing here or sitting here. Now
Mm-hmm.
I'm in more pain when I work out. So it's like, okay, I start working out less, and less working out, and my diet goes the other way,
Mm-hmm.
and it led to that happening. Where when I was in, I was able to mitigate it in because I was eating more clean and then working out like a madman.
I got you. So you said you're dealing with a lot of injuries. Like, are you doing any type of regular exercise now? What are you doing?
I mean, I'm a go-getter, Nick. I go for walks every day. But in all
Hey, you
seriousness,
know what? Those walks are freaking great. If you're doing that every day too, that's
we do,
gold, man.
Corey and I mean, two things. I think physical and mental go together, and
Absolutely.
just getting out, going for a couple mile walk. Now, if it's like really cold, snowing, raining, we're not that hardcore, but
Hmm.
I think it does good for the body. I mean, I know it does, but it also for the mind, just like, and for us, bonding, right? Is we both work from home. We've launched a business, all this, but it's our time to just kind of get out. Like we went yesterday and we got to watch an otter swim around and climb up on a log. And it's just, that's not physical, but wow, we're like, wow, that was a special moment. It's
Hmm.
just good for you to get out and do stuff. So, I don't run anymore. Well, hiking, I'm walking, and a little
Sure.
bit of other exercise, but and then when it gets warmer, I'll do a lot more swimming and like water work. Um,
Yeah.
which truthfully for me, I know, I know we're not on a fitness show, but like, how do I do that in the winter without going to a pool somewhere else? Because I have a pool in my house. So I now figured out like, hey, I'm going to fluctuate a little in the winter to the summer because my workout is changing.
Yeah. No, there's nothing wrong with that. And I don't know about you, but I'm not one of those like jumping in the cold tub people. I'm not, I'm not that hardcore about it. I think a lot like you. I like to um stick. I go to the gym regularly, but doing the walks and stuff, man, you're right. It just clears your mind. And man, you mentioned something about like bonding with Corey, and that's pretty clear. That's an important part of your life. And I wonder if you could maybe talk about what she has meant to you in your life. And I see your body language, so I know it's real. But
It,
maybe you can maybe talk about her a little bit in your relationship.
it is. And I truly believe, like I said, having retired in the military, I would not be here to be on this podcast if it wasn't for my dog, Liberty, who recently we ended up having to put down at the beginning of this year, which was very tough for me because like that dog literally saved my life. Because not that I was going to take my life, but I didn't care to be alive. And then
Gotcha.
Corey, she got me to Corey. And then Corey, just the care and grace, but also pushback that I don't necessarily like, right? Didn't it be like, hey, what do you mean? Like, but I needed that. And to me, it's been important. And for us, it's been important for our brand and who we are to show that because like alcohol is kind of pushed in the military. When do you ever talk about your spouse? And I'm coming from a place of I've messed this up. I've been, I have previous marriages, so I'm not sitting here in some,
Sure.
pedestal saying what it is, but I learned along the way, and Corey did too. Similar circumstances, married a couple times. We figured it out, right? We just met each other at the right time, and we're like, hey, it should be okay to like go, but it's even in corporate America, right? Like people travel for work, whether in sales or this convention, and like,
Mm-hmm.
how's that helping the family? Yes, people need to put food on the table, but like our thought is the more you're apart, the more you're going to be apart. And essentially, what are you doing together, right? So I've only met a few people that could like actually pull that off, spending a lot of time frequently over the years separated and minimally together,
Right.
and they
Right.
still stay committed and good. So yeah, it's very important for us to talk about. It's very important for us to live and model. And from a point of we're not perfect. To
Sure.
be fair, we had an argument, if you will, a verbal disagreement this morning, right? Like it is real. We're real, and we think that's real, right? Instead of like, oh, everyone gets along and everything. Like, good for you if you do, but like, I don't know, we're humans, and sometimes we disagree.
Yes. And sometimes that can be a good thing, actually.
Yep.
At the end of the day, you kind of learn. I think you learn where you're at in terms of what wavelength you're on, right?
Yep.
Like, okay, all right. Well, I thought she was thinking like this, but no, that's not how she's thinking. Um, so I think at the end of the day, sometimes can be a really good thing.
Yeah, it's just I think it is because I also went through a relationship where that didn't happen, and it
Hmm.
just festered, and it was a
Yeah,
ticking time
yeah,
bomb,
that's
and
it
like
right there.
now we can't just disagree because like I didn't, put the
Hmm.
toilet seat down. Now we're disagreeing over everything that's happened over the last 14 years or 12 months, and it's like,
Right, right.
boom. And part of that's me. A lot of it's me, the service I've gone through, the effects of that, but some of it is just, hey, try to get better, right? And that's what I'm always trying to do every day is get better. That's what we're trying to do as a couple, get better every day and be there for each other, to push each other and to support each other.
And let's be real, they remember everything, okay? They remember everything. And they see everything. I don't know what it is, but my wife has like eagle vision. She can see stuff from across the room. I'll be standing in the fridge like, where did I put the cheese? And she'll be like, across the room, lower left corner on the right, you know? And I'm like, oh, what?
It's,
For some
it's,
reason, they see everything and they remember everything.
it's same thing happens to me in our house and even with our kids too, right? But Corey is so like who she is that she labeled stuff in the fridge. So there's like, hey, here's the milk, here's the cheese and stuff.
Mhm.
And still like, where is it? It's just like that guy. But like certain things, she's like, dude, we'll be driving and you won't even look over and you're like, there's a deer and it's 300 meters away and it's like walking. And I'm like, yep, there's a deer right. Like I called that without even looking. She's like, how can you see the deer 300 meters away, but you can't see the milk 3 inches from your face?
Right.
That.
Yeah, yeah. Well, don't worry, man. I can't find the milk either. It's it's all good, man. So what? Maybe like sticking to that topic of relationships. How are you translating what you've learned through your relationship with Corey to what you're doing in business?
That's a good question.
I know sometimes I get these questions. And I'm like, man, that's a good question. And if people watch this podcast, I want you to know that sometimes I filibuster in order to give the guest time to think through the answer a little bit before I let them speak. So I don't know. If you're the first time watching this podcast, you should know sometimes I do that, and it's in order to give somebody a little bit of time. Anyways, now you've had time. See?
Yeah. No, no, I'll say first though, my mindset that made me good in my career and what I'm saying in the military doesn't necessarily translate to being a good husband and doing that. And by that, I meant block out emotions, block out pain, mission accomplishment at all costs, go through that. It doesn't necessarily work. So I had to reframe that, right? And Corey had to help me reframe that. She also had to help me see her as a teammate, which I was like, you're a teammate? Like, oh my God, I got to look at this differently. So yeah, I think that helps, right? And for me, multiple ways, right? Corey has had her own career and has learned, along that and strategy and sales and branding and recruiting, just a lot of like tactical information, right? A lot of knowledge that like you just get by doing. So there's that, but also there's certain things that like I may not understand. I get to ask her that, but really what I love about it is we come from two very different backgrounds. But if we're talking about something, that probably means we're getting two different inputs, right? And that probably means we come up with a better answer. So that's the one thing I love about it is like, what are you thinking? This is what I'm thinking.
Sure.
And sometimes I'm like, that's dumb, but okay. And then she's like, what? And I was like, oh man, did I say that out loud? And but like, that's just being real, right? But like, I think getting that difference of opinions and just a different perspective, maybe that's a better way, a different perspective on an issue. And I don't care what that is, just it's good.
No, I think that's great advice. I mentioned earlier how a lot of people spend time in their own heads, right? And until you put an idea out into the world and let it bounce off of somebody, it's not really a real thing. So I think that's great. It's always good to have different perspectives, even if you disagree with those perspectives. That's all right.
Just get out and talk. And it's what we did in the Special Forces team room. It was a little more brutal and honest, but it's like, get an idea out there. People will shoot it down, do that. I had to figure out how to say it a little differently now. But it's similar model of like, let's put an idea out there and pick it apart and look at it and go through.
Yeah, you mentioned your brand earlier. Can you maybe talk about that? Like, what are you guys doing? And want to ask you some questions about that because that's the topic I'm interested in and just kind of understanding brand building. It's an interesting area.
6 years ago, if you asked me about my brand, I probably would have shut this laptop and walked away.
Me too.
Because
I would have not asked you, but yes, me too.
It had a negative connotation, right? It made me think of a car salesman or I don't know. Yeah. But no matter if we like it or not, we have that, right? And I know this is not a textbook definition, but it's how others perceive us, right? Sure. Maybe some would say their reputation, right? And so for me, I got on LinkedIn and I was just like, hey, I need to do this for survival. And I got to be like, cool, I'm helping some people out. And like other people got me to see it. Corey got me to see of just impact I was having on others. And people are always like, what are you doing that for? Because I care, right? I don't know. It's just who I am. And then I'll be honest, people are like, well, how do you leverage it? I was like, I don't know. Like, I'm just doing it because I believe in it. And maybe someday I'll know why. And that gets to where we're at today of, we're looking at starting a business. Truthfully, we had a different business model, a different name. We had put some money into it. And, we were on a walk and Corey was like, hey, I know we put money and time into this other thing. Like, I think, God's speaking to me, whatever you want to call it, but we need to do this Liberty Speaks and we need to change our business model. Okay, well, let's talk about this. By the way, we've invested some money in this, in time. So really it really came down to, I like to speak, right? I like to go out, speak, be on this podcast, speak as a keynote speaker, workshops, etc. And for me, I had a similar feeling to when I was on the X, we completed a mission, getting back on the bird, or getting back at base and like, that's awesome. We did something. Or even as a drill sergeant, when I got to have a platoon or a company and I teach them something, and you see the light bulbs click, and it's like,
Sure.
that
Yeah.
feeling I can't be bought. I love that on a stage or in front of people. It doesn't have to be a formal stage. And I love helping people. Back when why did I want to be a Green Beret, right? I love helping people, love to help people as a drill sergeant. I like that. So Liberty Speaks is that, right? It is speaking and then helping people. So getting people together and really just a little community of speakers who are authentic. Um, and you can call me a lot of things, but I will say authentic is one of them, as I hear most often, right? And what you see is what you get. If it's not your cup of tea, that's okay. It's okay if we don't have to make everyone happy, but I am who I am. I'm going to be comfortable with who I am. And that's what we want. Our speakers who are interesting, talented, can tell a story that makes people better off when they leave the room, and they're authentic. And that's what we're doing with Liberty Speaks.
Great. And then, and what is the plan to do that? Like, are you, do you have speakers in mind that you've connected with? And then if it's a business, who are your customers? You
Yep.
talk about a room. Are you going to be hosting events and that sort of thing?
We will eventually get to hosted events.
Gotcha. Okay.
As we take this 2 weeks into this venture, fully launched. But Corey joked, "Hey, we got to get cars in the car lot before we have people come buy the cars." So obviously,
Sure.
it was get a pool of speakers, and I made
Hmm.
a list. She made a list, and then we discussed it, right? Different viewpoints. Why this person? Why not? Why would that be? And kind of blended those lists together, and then we started to reach out to people and say, "Hey, let's go." And we've just had tremendous response from people, wanting to be a part of it. And I mean, we got uh former, and it's not just veteran focused, though.
Sure.
Due to who I am, who we are, there is a lot of veteran influence, if you will.
Hmm.
But we got some really cool people, like that I'm very proud of. Like previous guest of yours, Riley, right?
Hmm.
U.S. Olympic or hopeful, but U.S. bobsled team, Marine, children's author. She's someone, but then also like Mike Stedman, who graduated from the Naval Academy, and to me is just so authentic. And he went on to be a Marine and
Yeah.
setting up different things with branding and boxing and up in Newark, New Jersey, and kind of inner city, helping kids by teaching them boxing. It's just really cool people like that, and some soft guys and like Pasha, and part inspiring stories of overcoming struggles with mental health and what they've learned in their careers. And it's one of my former professors at Cornell, who's just, I think, the world of. And and then we have another entrepreneurial professor from University of Michigan. I mean, it's just this interesting group of people that if you talk to them, you're going to be better off for it. Then who are customers? Hey, companies, events, event coordinators, managers, people that put them on. Eventually, one day, we will probably in 2026 have events of our own with just our speakers. But
Hmm.
right now, it's corporations all the time pay people to come in and speak
Sure.
and to make their organization better, whether it's to inspire or to teach them something. They do that, and same with events, and that's really who our customers are.
That's awesome. Well, it sounds great. And it sounds like you have a good foundation for making a successful platform. So I'll be looking forward to what is the website?
LibertySpeaks.com, and it's
LibertySpeaks.com.
my dog, the one that I said, got
Mm-hmm.
me to where I am. That was her name. So we're like, hey, how can we honor her? But also Liberty. Like Liberty stands for something.
Sure does.
And that is what we want. And that speaks, obviously, speaking and people speaking out and being authentic. So that's why we want Liberty Speaks.
Okay, awesome. Well, definitely check out that website. I'll put links in the description as I always do for everybody. I want to kind of maybe shift topics a little bit about the current. I mean, since you were a drill sergeant and you're talking about connecting with people and um, all that good stuff, wanted to maybe shift over to talking about young people. Like what would be out of your experience, um, what would be the best piece of advice, or maybe the advice that sticks out to you that you would give like a young 20-year-old kid that maybe is trying to find their way in the world?
I love this question. One of them, and not in any certain order, but where you start is where you don't have to end up. For me, highlight of my youth was, at 12 years old, around there, we got kicked out of the trailer park. I mean, we were in the trailer park, so it wasn't the Ritz, right? And then we got kicked out. So like, just because you start there poor, my dad lost his factory job, had to go on welfare when I was like starting high school. Hey, just because I started there doesn't mean I have to end up there. So that to care enough to not care what other people think. Because as we talked before this call, with social media and everything, there is so much noise. And you can get lost in it. And a lot of this is, hey, what you see right here, I'm real, right? This is real. This isn't fake. But like, I always reference the Kardashians, and now I feel like that's making me old. But like, I don't think anyone looks at them and goes, they're authentic and that's all real, right? And many different facets. But we see that on social media, and we've seen it with our kids, and they're like, well, we see this and we see this on social media. We're like, dude, that's not real, man. And now as they're getting older, they're seeing it. A couple have gone to college, and they're like, oh yeah, that isn't real life. Like, that people post on there is like some make believe land, but kind of put that noise out of there. Then I would say, life isn't linear. And by that, I mean, there's not a certain pathway. There's not only one way to get somewhere. Sometimes you go forward and then you go backwards, and you're going around and around and you go. It doesn't have to be linear. It's not always going to probably be that way. Life happens. Sure. And then setbacks will happen. Everyone gets kicked and falls down. The only difference is what you do when you get back up. Do you cower? Do you go, oh, woe is me, and go sit on the couch and that's your life? Or do you go, let's get after it. I'm back at it again. And those that are successful, they get back after it again. And the more you do it, I think the more resilient you become. And overcoming hardship and learning stuff doesn't come quickly. And then you can really determine what is successful in life. I can't determine your success. My parents can't determine my success. My friends, whatever. And then maybe my intimate family can have a say in what success is. But at the end of the day, I look in the mirror, and that's the most important.
Well, that's great. So where you start isn't where you have to end up. You don't have to take a perfect straight path and pick your damn self up, man, by the bootstraps and get rocking. I love it. That's good. Good advice. What about since you wrote the book, I'm going to ask you, what about the best piece of advice for people transition out of the military?
I say this all the time. This is for anyone, right? It goes along with what we were just talking about. Own your journey. Don't do it because Herb did or Nick did or someone else did it. Like, what do you really want to do? And that's hard sometimes to figure out what you want to do. And sometimes we have to try something and figure out we don't like it to try something else. But own your journey, right? It's yours. You're not entitled to anything. You have to go earn it and go get it. And if you were aggressive and motivated in the military and major success, use that same mentality outside of the military.
Awesome. I'm gonna let you have, the floor basically, but this is the prompt, okay? This is the prompt. If you would indulge me for a second. I'm a young, we'll say 14-year-old kid, smart, but kind of live in the middle of nowhere. Can you motivate me to be successful in life?
Do you want to just sit on the couch all day? Or do you want people to look at you? People to look at you and go, wow, that's a pretty good guy. Or that's a pretty good gal. You aren't going to get that by just sitting there, right? What happens when you look in the mirror? Are you proud of yourself? No matter what you did that day, are you proud? And you put in hard work. If not, okay, fix it. Go do that. The only person that controls what you see in that mirror is you. And that's really what it comes down to, is how do you see yourself? And if you're happy with yourself and you're proud of yourself, that's all that matters. So go make yourself proud.
I love it, man. Great, awesome advice. And I think, we'll have to send this to all the young people so they can track Herb Thompson. Hey, I was going to ask if you'll join me over on the members only section for a little bit. So we're going to have a little bit of fun over there. If you're unfamiliar, you can join on YouTube. I think it's $2 a month or something like that. Sign up. You get all sorts of perks, free access, early access to videos, members only videos that exist on there. And there'll be all sorts of cool stuff I'll be putting on there, behind the scenes footage, all sorts of stuff. And definitely recommend people checking it out. I will put all the links to Herb in the description, his social media links that he wants to share. All that stuff will be in there. Herb, thanks for being here, man.
It was my pleasure. I appreciate having me on. And hey, everyone, own your journey.